Thanks very much for tuning in to today's episode of Back to the City. I have another of the bands who are playing at this month's Back to the City showcase, along with Candid, who were on last week. Welcome, Edward the Confessor, 3/4 of Edward the Confessor. Momentarily, we'll be joined by your fourth member in the Minnehaha Recording Company. Not only were you brave enough to have a record release on Friday 13th, but we're brave enough to talk about how great it went. Because it has happened in between this interview and the release of this interview. Meaning that the next show is the final Thursday of this month with Candid Kid Karate Break and the debut of the new City Councillor lineup at Mortimers.
Nice.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here today. Let's begin every episode as we do, jumping through the green screen to the Minnehaha Recording Company, where you're going to play the opening and title track from the record, which was out on Friday the 13th.
Yes.
Young America.
Reflection of my empty stare, racing through the dark underneath the blue fluorescent glare. So look in my eyes, there's nowhere to hide in young America. Gotta get out, gotta get out, gotta get out. Where you are, gotta get out to get out. Gotta get out to where you are.
That was Young America, the title track from their excellent new record by Edward the Confessor, congratulations for releasing a great record.
Thanks. Thank you.
We're going to take a bit of a journey through some of the songs on that, zooming in on the 3 songs that you've performed at the Minnehaha Recording Company. The opening lyrics to a very similarly titled song are, they pulled in just behind the bridge, she lays her down, he frowns, gee my life's a funny thing, am I still too young? Of course is how Young Americans by David Bowie begins. And there is some affinity, I think, between that song, at least the emphasis on automobiles. In the song Young America, alone in the back of the MV, the back of the MBTA is the opening lyric, and then soon enough we're racing through the dark underneath the blue fluorescent glare, carried by the sound, we're hurtling at breakneck speeds, highway station as well as the third track. Is there a significance to the presence of automobiles and racing, hurtling at breakneck speeds down the highway?
That's a great question, especially the way it connects with the cover art. You know, I wouldn't have really thought that we were meaning to focus on that, but it wouldn't shock me that it came out as we were starting to put lyrics together. That there's some movement in there. You know, we play pretty fast. You know, I think there's an interesting aspect of that, motion and being in cars and I don't know, the extremity of it all and the
Absolutely.
sensation and all that. So that's it. We've kept a pretty consistent thread in the 3 records that we've done with, looking at themes of sort of like decay and decline and slightly darker subjects, but not necessarily a dark treatment of them, just sort of exploration of, you know, what does it mean to have things sort of decay and age, and the title itself is sort of meant to be a contrast, Young America, using a title, Young America, but a fair amount of the songs are really about sort of aging. We've got a song called Sundowning, which is sort of about the decline of dementia and things like that, and then another song that's kind of about the decline of small towns. You know, I guess it's funny that you picked on a motion thing in there, because I'm not sure we would have thought about that, but there may be an aspect that I'll have to think about. Maybe the danger of, you know, heading towards a car crash, who knows?
Yeah, right, absolutely, yeah. I think that will be a recurring focus in the conversation.
The car crash of life.
Now that I just said that, Sean did actually have a song at one point that was sort of about that. I think it was about him driving a 4-wheeler, like almost in a ditch or something, so maybe he has something going on. Our 4th member who came
on a previous record, and he's another of the lyricists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I write along with Sean, and we co-write most of the music, and then Sean and I will trade a fair amount of the ideas for the songs.
The difference, of course, between Young Americans and Young America is that it is America that is young in the title just here.
Sure.
There are 2 lyrics that refer to Young America in the song Young America, and those are, look into my eyes, there's no place to hide in Young America, and then later, there's nothing but time to change your mind in Young America. So in what sense is America young, and what kind of key do those 2 specific lyrics provide to the record and to that song?
We actually, without giving too much of the magic away, we were joking around about a concept around a small town, and we happened to kind of glom onto Norwood, Young America, which is, I'm not even familiar enough to know exactly how small it is. So we lopped off the Norwood and stuck with Young America, but then made it more generic. Young America is an idea, Young America is a small town. I think the character in that song is meant to be young.
The character
the protagonist in that song is meant to be a kid, a teen or a kid who's found somebody who he falls in love with online, and he doesn't realize that the person is actually dead. The girl or person that he falls in love with, and so he tracks the person out to Young America, and so those 2 lines are really just about how he's reached a point where there's nothing but time to change your mind, you know, on your way out to kind of prove yourself to this person that you found that you've fallen in love with, and it doesn't exist
because like you exist perpetually online is kind of what the way that it. Like your stuff doesn't die. So this person latched onto someone who was deceased, unbeknownst to this kid.
How did that announce itself to you? Are you the lyricist for this song?
Sean and I collaborated on this one. This is honestly, we were just sitting around, and I don't know exactly how it started. I think we were joking around about Norwood Young America just because it's a really interesting name.
Yeah.
And yet, it's sort of ironically ill-fitting for a small town that's probably not exactly taking off. I mean, in our concept, it's probably not the real Young America, but we're just thinking about like, oh, that's funny. Wouldn't it be funny if there was a place called Young America that was really sort of this aging, decrepit, old small town, cemeteries and, crumbling storefronts, et cetera. And here the concept would be this kid would, find somebody online that he falls in love with and doesn't realize it's a forever, somebody's presence online, that person's actually passed away. And so he goes out to this place and finds out that the town's decrepit. There's really nothing there. The person he's fallen in love with is in the cemetery, et cetera. So.
Right. So this complete incongruity between like the youthful love and then the decay that's discovered. Yeah. Of course, like this country is as countries go, is a relatively young country.
Right, yeah.
Is that relevant to the record, the relative youth of the country?
I don't think of the country, but I think actually even in the youth of the country, that there's still so much aging that has already happened. I mean, especially when you put it in the small town context, where small towns, and especially in Minnesota, and we're familiar with Minnesota, and Sean's got a lot of history with North Dakota, et cetera. You see these small towns crumbling that were only 100 years ago, bustling places of youth and activity, whereas now they're kind of interesting studies in what happens as things age and fall apart. And there's a lot of beauty in that. So we were kind of thinking about how to explore the beauty of the downside of that, while still, thinking about issues like, youth and motion and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, there's scenario in the opening song of someone not realizing, because of the perpetuity of one's online presence. That's interesting to think about in relation to the song that we can hear at the moment from the record, which is Report Position. I mean, some of the lyrics in there highlight there's no new status in the last 5 minutes. And the opening lyric highlights that there's no GPS in the last 30 seconds. We're so used to being bombarded with information that we feel at a loss when 30 seconds or 5 minutes pass without an information update. So what's the relationship between what's happening in that song and what's happening in the opening track then? Because both seem to have to do with online presence and what kind of perception is formed because of our ideas about online presence.
I think that's a really great link. They are similar in that, whereas Report Position is a little more directly, and obviously as you've picked out lyrics about, literally watching somebody's posts, and trying to understand what they are. Maybe it's even the same kind of a thing where, you've fallen for somebody and you're kind of getting to know them online, but then they stop posting, or, it's been, 5 seconds and you don't know what's happening, and, does that mean, they're not out there anymore?
Yeah.
Or as they do post, trying to understand what it is. What am I seeing? Like, what are you doing? Who are you with? What is it all about? And that kind of intensity. But I think there's a connection there, because I think Young America kind of starts from that premise that you found somebody online, again, remotely. You don't know them, as we do in social media.
And it highlights initially the falsity of the idea that we do know what's going on because of what's seen online.
Right. Yeah.
Incongruity seems important throughout the record. So we've got youth and age.
Contrast, exactly.
And then inside and outside. Mm-hmm. Gotta get out to where you are is the first time that this emphasis on the internal and the external comes about. And there it fits with this like romantic idea that I'm picturing this, youthful person excited about fresh love and traveling to Little Young America.
Yeah, Little Young America, right, on the back of the MVTA bus. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
But then each time that moment in the song comes about, it becomes more complex. So
it shifts. Yeah.
It shifts. Yeah. How does it shift?
Mm-hmm. I think as we try and follow the narrative arc of the kid essentially finding the person and then trying to figure out, should he go out and try and find her actually in person, and as he kind of does, but yet starts to come face to face with the fact that, that she's actually passed away and she's buried, and he discovers that the address that he's found for her is actually the cemetery, and, the gated community is kind of a plan where it's in that the gated community is the cemetery. And so she's in the ground. She can't get out of the gated community, obviously, but as we were kind of playing with concepts of small town and suburbia at the same point, we decided to stick with the gated community thing because it's kind of, it's a mainstay in some places depending on what how things have been developed, and so it just seemed like a good kind of image to bring up that could go both ways.
Yeah, so it works on this metaphorical level, but it definitely works on the literal level, because the final lyric is "You'll never get out, and I'll never get in," and I think that's just such, a rich close to the song, and we have this idea of yearning to to get in somewhere. It's
and like in the essence of adolescent love or love period, where there's always there's frequently distance between people, and that's sometimes the great thing about love, and the frustrating thing about love is sometimes you can't close the distance, and that's what seemed like an interesting story when we started ripping it out. I was like, oh, that's perfect, because in this weird idea, like, no, kid can't ever know her, and vice versa.
Yeah, how did this song develop? Did it begin with the narrative, and then lyrics, and then song structure, or?
If I remember right, this started purely on music. You had the intro riff. This was the first thing that you wrote.
There wasn't a bass part to this song when I joined.
Okay.
So this was like the first song we worked up from scratch.
With Dylan.
I mean, it was like these guys could pretty much play it, front to back without a bass part, but
we had not played it at all with a bass, with our previous bass player at all.
Who is David Leduc, who just released a record, which is great too.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did Dylan become the new David? How did Dylan enter the band?
We were recalling just a few minutes ago. Edward the Confessor went in to record at the Pearl, where I was assisting Zach Hollander at. And was that? Did you say like six years ago to the day?
Yeah, 6 years ago to the date.
Did Facebook inform you?
Yes. Speaking of social media, just to remind me that I'm not as young as I was 6 years ago.
I was assisting there, and I met these guys, and just really admired their sound, and I was busy with other projects at the time.
Communist Daughter?
It was Communist Daughter. There was a band called Junebug, and we stayed in touch. And I think Leduc, his life pulled him a different way, and
he was really busy with Enemy Planes and had done his first solo recording. I think it was still probably doing the MTVs. So he was pretty busy, and it was a pretty organic handover. He had a lot of stuff going on and was fine with us going ahead, and we were really lucky that Dylan was available, because it's as you can hear, the music is pretty detailed and kind of requires a certain ability to engage with that. It can be kind of frustrating for some people, but other people really dig it, and it happened to be a good match with what Dylan not only was capable of but interested in doing. So it was a really, really lucky match, and we've been really, really fortunate. And ironically, we had him in the band for 4 or 5 years before he even got a chance to be on a record that we put out. We had the second record done before, or just
with
about
David,
done, right as we were grabbing
second
him.
EP had a song called Slow Mover, and it's kind of telling.
It was a slow mover.
You're responsible for the fast movement and therefore all of the car references.
Sure,
perhaps.
Sure. We'll get that. You can have that.
I needed a sweet video for it, so that's pretty cool.
We were speaking about Dylan's capabilities. I'm incapable of imagining this song without bass. Having witnessed this.
Sure. No, it was really rich. It was fertile grounds for like, I don't deviate much from any of the perceived roots of the chords. That's one thing. The way that these guys write their guitar parts, they're using inversions. So it's like, well, I can either add a lot of weight to whatever chord we're on by doing a substitution, making their harmony bead in a low register. So or I can follow pretty directly with what there might be, and that's so there's like a section in the song where it drops down, and the substitutions that I'm doing were kind of the way that it leads the chords around. It's light, and it never quite resolves, so it kind of stays afloat until it breaks back into a section. So I don't know. It's fun. Like I said, the song was pretty rich with possibilities, but it kind of, to me, it kind of felt like it wrote itself.
Yeah, we choose to be carried by the sand.
Yeah, got it.
You could have just said that.
which we're finding amusing because it is the name of the song that you're about to play back in the Minnehaha Recording Company. Are you going to be carried by the sound to the same extent in Carried by the Sound?
Yeah, this one was a pretty hefty collaboration on all of our parts. Yeah, I mean, for me in the sets, the live sets, this is one of my favorite to play.
Yeah, this is a favorite of mine too, and if I remember correctly, we debuted it on the Back to the City radio show.
Very sloppy mix for you.
Yeah.
That I slaved over, but I'll still call it sloppy.
You did a mix. It doesn't. It didn't strike me as sloppy in the least.
Yeah, okay.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, Nick and I did the interview about a year ago.
That was fun, with lots of lyrical analysis with no lyricists.
Yeah,
right. The rhythm section trying to talk about songs.
That's the better way to do it, because you probably got more coherent statements out there.
I just learned a lot, I gotta tell you.
Well, yeah.
There's an interlude on the album that we titled Roulette, and it goes back to the young America, the small towns, and just kind of the romance of that, right?
Yeah.
Just sonically, that's what's conveyed sonically here.
The approach to finalizing and composing the two interludes on the album was far different from our approach for like the majority of the songs.
How so?
They started with very undeveloped ideas, mostly like looped, repeating, not looped in the sense of like, setting a loop and just looping it, but just
more repetitious.
Played, very repetitious. It's more expansive and like more, a lot more parallel and a lot more building and layering.
Yeah.
Much broader sonic palette. I mean, the point was in an interlude pretty much to write something we probably wouldn't do live, but might be an interesting break in the record, acknowledging that our stuff can be somewhat dense depending on your interest in the style or not. But also just, I think an interest in ourselves, just playing around, swapping ideas back and forth.
Maybe instead of
developing
going
something,
so this way, you go a little bit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just kind of
like no rules. Like whatever you want to bring in, you bring in. We brought in more keyboard. We tracked some drums after the fact on another interlude.
Well,
so just like did a bunch of stuff.
There's actually 2 drum tracks on that. Two
Might be,
completely different drum parts.
There's 2 of you
at the same time.
Just fun.
And I think I played both of those beats for about 3 hours the night that we were
Probably,
tracking.
yeah.
Just
we were fighting
some technical stuff, but still.
Yeah.
But
Not fighting each other.
yeah.
We were fighting technology. Anyway, Sean named the song Roulette, and then one of my best friends happens to be from Roulette, North Dakota, and like completely unbeknownst to the rest of these guys, Rob got this picture of Roulette, and I sent it to my friend, and he's like, oh, that's really curious. I'm wondering how you got that name. So I just told him it was kind of all happenstance, and he's like, well, yeah. He's like, I'd really like to hear that song, and he's like, well, yeah. Coincidentally enough, it really kind of outlines how I feel about my hometown. He just grew up there, and it's kind of like.
Did he elaborate on how so?
Just depressing and desolate.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, in the sense of like it just being like some place where you grow from and you leave behind.
Yeah.
But importantly, like especially from an outsider, so that's an interesting perspective from somebody who was there, which is the flip of the coin from the outsider perspective, and it's just an interesting idea. Like, what's it like? What's it like to live in that? What's the desolation? But importantly, not just to take it at face value, like, oh, it's kind of sad to watch a small place kind of die out, or you move on from it. It's what most people do from small towns. You kind of move on. And I think what Sean and I keep thinking about is, why shouldn't you be going back? Like you might not be able to go back because you grew up there, but there's a lot of beauty in this that people who didn't grow up there get out of seeing that. Like I just look at that picture and I think of all kinds of stories, like who walked down that street? What? Whose view was that?
He gave me a big rundown of where that specifically is.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It was.
Let's see here.
And it's kind of good. He brings even more imagery, which is kind of like, oh wow, that's exactly the kind of interesting detail that you can't get from a photo, you can't get from a city
said
kid.
He woke up every day and that was his view.
Pretty much.
He says, I said, does this photo look at all familiar? He says, sure does. I never climbed that water tower, but perhaps I still can. I worked at the grocery store, Super Value, on Main Street. This is a view from probably just right about outside the front of the Catholic Church on Main Street, facing south. Haha, I'm curious what the song Roulette is like. He said, fitting how the photo is taken from outside the Catholic Church for Edward the Confessor.
Which we didn't try to.
That
That's
cover
cool.
is of a view I saw nearly every Sunday afternoon growing up. That church would sound awesome to record in, too.
Let's go.
So would the Old Town Hall and Roulette. I'm curious how Roulette got into the mix here, though. Haha.
It's interesting the emphasis on the cyclical, because if we think of roulette as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But also the way that you're described, because we begin song Young America, rather than in Young Americans pulling up just behind the bridge. We're not pulling up behind the bridge. Sure. We are hurtling down the highway with a sense of purpose. Yeah. But then these interludes end up being spaces where there is both sonically more of a cyclical feel, but also in terms of theme, this sense of a return to a place that one knows, rather than this yearning to be somewhere else and this kind of perhaps naive or certainly uninformed desire to be somewhere new.
That's almost like what Camouflage is about too, in a sense, right?
It's exactly. Yeah.
There's a song on the first EP. It's a similar thing, like people, kind of wearing on their sleeve, like how they want to depart from this small, feeling like they're small town, so they kind of overcompensate.
I've got to get out of this place if it's the last thing I ever
exactly.
do.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Which is completely understandable.
And you were just kind of...
And as somebody who didn't grow up in a small town, I'm the opposite. I'm going, wow, look at that cool place. Look at that stuff. And because I didn't have that limiting experience, or I didn't have that push out, we're instead taking this time to think about what's still there. What was that feeling like? It's a strong feeling. We've all wanted to get out of a place for sure, but we just haven't experienced that specific experience. Maybe Sean has, but I haven't.
If many of the songs kind of encapsulate this sense of a journey to somewhere, and the interludes have this idea of a return, the narrative of Carried by the Sound, which we'll focus on after the performance in a moment, seems to me to be about the absence of a return. So we're expecting, it begins, it's 2 a.m. and I haven't seen you yet, and then within moments it's 3 a.m. and there's still the absence of this person, so there's not a return of a person. So that sets the scene for the song. Let's return to the Minnehaha Recording Company for the performance and then dive into that one. Okay, so here's Carried by the Sound by Edward the Confessor, performed at the Minnehaha Recording Company.
Seen you yet? Did you take off or did you get lost? It's 3 a.m. across the parking lot. It's heavy on, but what's the cost? Breathe in the sweet autumn air. Hurry along, walking by the speed. Take off to any place. Hurry along and break this. breakneck speed. We're hurrying along that breakneck speed.
So that was Carried by the Sound. I love that it's called Carried by the Sound as opposed to Broken by the Speed, which one might expect to be the more obvious title for it. The recurring refrain, as we just heard a lot, was Broken by the Speed. Why is the song not called Broken by the Speed?
Because that would be obvious.
Yeah, it's classic.
Because then we wouldn't have anything to talk about.
Yeah.
I would say this song musically was constructed. He brought it in with the verse and like I'd say it's like the B verse. It's not a pre-chorus, but those were like it was just missing a chorus, right? And but other than that, like it was pretty solidly just Sean's idea from the lyrical approach. Again, all except for the chorus and like the intro. But he wrote like there's a short bridge. Well, there's a few bridges, but he wrote one of the bridges. And yeah.
Rob wrote the guitar solo. Come on,
Yeah, right.
It's the best part.
Yeah, it is. But I was like, that needs to be the loudest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because the record will probably, it may not be obvious to people, but that's what we like about the band, I think, is we've got a range of ways that we approach songwriting. Sometimes it's somebody will bring the majority of the song semi-finished. That's great. I think maybe at least 3 songs on this record were almost entirely co-written, which is pretty interesting because, again, almost everybody's got experience.
From previous Edward the Confessor?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. Yeah, Sean and I probably wrote more of the structure of a fair amount of stuff before. Again, because David was playing bass, but was pretty busy in other stuff, so he wasn't quite as much a writer as I mean, he wrote his bass parts for certainly, but he mostly embellished. Whereas, like Dylan's been able to contribute as a writer. We're lucky to have Nick as a writer. He's got a writing experience. Dylan's got music writing experience. So it's kind of cool to have 4 people who can all write at pretty similar levels.
Yeah.
And if we choose, an idea kind of strikes us, we can let it develop between the 4 of us. And that's, I think, Wealth of Want is like that on this record.
Which will close today's episode.
Yep, The Match and the Spade, the last song we did together pretty much.
That came out of his bass riff.
Exactly. Yeah.
That song
So-
was written because of that.
Which only happens
Every now and then.
3
but-
times.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, I think that's what we've really enjoyed in this phase of the band is like having the luxury of that. We've got, everybody's got a fair amount to say and a fair amount of a role, so we don't get stuck in any rut. If it's time to move on from an idea, somebody's usually got something to go. So.
Right now we can hear said bass riff on Me, the Match and the Spade.
Me and the wrench and the chain.
I remember you coming to practice with it.
Yeah.
And we were all like,
hey, play that.
yeah,
Let's
play
write
that.
something to that.
Yeah, like let's write a song around
Way better
that.
than the rest of our day. The bass player wins. Woohoo!
So a fun approach that Edward Confessor has is kind of playing, kind of volleying with where you can substitute things in your accompaniment to someone else's part, because then once you do the substitutions, you know, that allows the person with the initial idea to pull out their idea and then volley off of what the accompaniment has done. So that's the way this song evolved. I mean, you can kind of hear that it's all a very similar movement throughout the song. The melody could work over pretty much the whole song, and different melodies could work over different parts, but they're put in different context with the way that the chords shape up. And the part was just fun to present and see how we could work it into our set, or make a song out of it.
And when we heard that idea, I had a sense for where it was going to go, and it did not go in that direction, and it went somewhere totally better and very interesting. I think even really until we were done recording it, we weren't entirely convinced it was working, and then when we were done with it, we were pretty happy. Like, I guess it all came together. Like, who would have thunk it? The concept of this one was definitely lyrically it's again the decline of the small town, but pretty much more literally in this one, focusing on the person who lives in the small town and is watching it decay around them. Even the first line of the song is, "I've watched you dying since the day I was born," and that's an allusion to essentially, I was born in this place and I've watched it crumble around me. And this was sort of describing, making kind of obviously a sort of fantasy story about, the person basically participating in, burning the town down. And it's just continuing to explore like an alternate theme of somebody, kind of getting trapped up in the decline and actually deciding, you know what?
I'm going to do something.
I'm going
to take this down.
They're going to be a more prominent part.
And then,
of this.
again, in the theme of leaving and coming back, the lyrical arc follows the person out of the town, runs away after burning it all down, and realizes they'd actually prefer to go back there, but it's gone. They burned it down. There's nothing you can't go back to. Your burned out home.
Yeah.
So
who would have thunk that your boards of Canada inspired bassline would lead to that?
Yeah, we might want to think about that next time.
I mean,
it
just
sounds like some characters died as a result of your bassline.
You may or may not.
He signed a legal waiver. It's okay.
Yeah. But I think that's the point too, is you can hear, the bass line was really beautiful. It was a really pretty, very developed melody.
I think that very incongruity is really encapsulated nicely in Carried by the Sound. The lyrics seem to suggest brokenness a lot more than they suggest the idea of being carried. Yeah. There is a sense, there's this missing person. Yeah. There's a lack of connection. We're being hurried. And yet it's called Carried by the Sound. The idea of being carried comes up at one other moment, at least in the record. 140 characters, Twitter, only carries me so far. There's a sense of lack. In the song Carried by the Sound, there's a missing person. Yeah. We're only being carried so far. We're not being carried by the sound. At the show, because of the pop sensibility, there'll be some happy customers at Mortimers enjoying the show, being carried by the sound. But the characters within the narratives are not. They're broken. Yeah. Broken by the speed.
They're broken, they're missing, they're searching. I think, you zeroed in on it. I mean, I think that's the point, is most of these ideas start out with looking for something. Young America, like, protagonist is looking for something and looking for something to fall in love with. And Carried by the Sound, for sure, that's how Sean relates what the song is essentially about, is searching for something that isn't showing up, that may or may not be real.
Though the characters in the stories are broken, the audience at the show will be safely carried by the sound, not contrary to comfort, not the antidote to hope. We'll have a nice time.
Yeah. Be merry.
We will deliver them safely to young America.
In the company of Candid Kid and Karate Break.
Cool, looking forward to this.
Yeah, we've witnessed some of their performance videos in this final segment just now. And we haven't witnessed City Councillor, because City Councillor will be debuting their new lineup. The first ever performance of the new 4-piece. And that will be on the 26th, Thursday 26th at Mortimers.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the closest thing that we have to preparation for that is this, your performance of Wealth of One. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for coming in to the
thank you, Simon.
and to the Minnehaha Recording Company. You're very welcome.
Yeah.
And
thanks to Tony. Thanks, Tony and crew.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and Tyler.
Exactly, Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
This is Wealth of Want by Ed the Confessor at the Minnehaha Recording Company.